Daniel, are you good?
Is there okay? They're over there, they're okay? Okay. Well then, thanks everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the SANDAG Audit Committee meeting, Friday, April 14th, 2023. We're sorry for a little bit of a late start, but of course the board meeting is continuing to go and occupy our space, so a little time to get some organization going here. Like to before we get started, I would like to introduce our interpreter, Grisel Villamagna, to introduce herself and walk through how to access our interpretation services for today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I will repeat the following message in English. Este es un aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior del Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono que aparece como un globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish o Español. Si está utilizando la aplicación desde el celular, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. Si se ha unido a la reunión de hoy en la sala de juntas de SANDAG y necesita interpretación al español, por favor diríjase a la recepción del piso 7 y solicite un receptor. Se parece a un pequeño iPod y se puede usar para escuchar la reunión en español. Solo sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are, click on the interpretation icon that appears as a globe, and select either English, Spanish, or Spanish. If you are using the Zoom mobile app from a cell phone or a tablet, please press the ellipsis and then interpretation and then choose your language. If you're joining us today at SANDAG and need interpretation into Spanish, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. It looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece that you can use to hear the meeting in Spanish. Simply hold it to your ear and the interpreter will come through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, yourself. With that, we can move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you for your time today. Please join me. Ready to begin?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic that will stand one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Due to the ongoing board meeting, we're going to be shifting things around a little bit. We'll push item 2 out until Ray is able to join us, if he's able to join us. And so we'll go ahead and the other change I wanted to make is about the orders of item 5 and 6. We'll take 6 as the first report. So then we'll go ahead and start with item 3, which is the updated.
They may be finished in there if we want to get the iPads for the other members of the event. I'm seeing.
I'm sure, yeah, if they can, they
They want
stop
to.
and bring in the iPads as they can. That they need them. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the OIPA update. I believe Lloyd's doing that.
Yes, today I'm doing it. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank SANDAG management for providing us the management response, as well as the proposed action plan for part 1 and 2 of the complex procurement audit. Currently, we're reviewing the management response to properly ensure that we address management's response. Address management response to the findings identified in the draft report. We'll then incorporate the management response and a review of the response into the final report for the IPA to review. So once we get that going, we'll put the draft, the final report together, incorporate it, and send it to the IPA for review. In addition to that, we're also reviewing the proposed action plan that was sent to us same day, which is for part 1 and part 2. The OIPA's office is also starting new audits and have sent out the engagement notices to the executive director. The audits that we're going to be conducting this time around is there's three different audits. One is the operational process and system control review. It's in for the inventory of major and minor assets for the period of July 1st, 2020 through March 31st of 2023. The second one is the operational process and system control review for board member and employee travel and other reimbursements for the period of July 1st, 2020 through the current period. The third one would be a continuous audit of the purchase card. It's for the period of March 1st, 2022 through the current period. Staff right now are currently conducting preliminary work for the pre-engagement and will be sending entrance conference shortly. Lastly, we have another intern leaving us. April 28th will be his last day. He accepted a position at Sacramento, so in an accounting firm. So again, we're going to be looking for new staff. As for the update, that is basically all I have for the updates.
Great, thank you. Jessica, any public comments on the update?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public comment, but I'm not sure if Blair wanted to speak on non-agenda public comment on.
Yeah.
We're on this
I
item.
take that one next,
Okay,
unless, Dr.
Thank you. I will wait for non-agenda public comment. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, one more item.
then no comments on this item.
And I guess this question, and Lloyd, how is it going with respect to getting, or Michael, some people signed up, board members signed up for the interviews for the audit plan for the next year.
Or the we can sign up for the
one-on-one meetings.
Oh, the risk assessment.
the risk assessment. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So far, the risk assessment is still ongoing. There were 31 invitations sent out. Mary or the IPS met with 5 board members, one AC member, one board member declined. There's 10 that are scheduled to meet, 1 executive, 5 board members, and 4 AC members. The IPA is still waiting for a response from the from 14, 4 executives and 10 board members. But at this point, this is all we know. We're not quite sure if Mary or if a board member or an executive has reached out to the IPA to schedule a meeting. So that's what we have.
Can you, at least with respect to the board members, for the executives, can you send me that information of where it's currently standing?
Yeah, definitely.
Encourage people who signed up. Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Any other board member comments?
Follow up on.
Yeah.
So I think you said 30 people altogether,
31.
31. And then so I assume it's the 5 audit committee members plus our alternate would be 6 of us, I'm guessing.
I have 1 audit committee member that already signed up or have met with Mary, and I have 4 AC
I would
members.
have to I'll have to double check if we sent one out to everyone. Did you,
I know, I received one.
I know, yeah. I have Agnes and you 3 are scheduled with Mary.
I'll be guilty. I'm just waiting to hear back from Mary.
All right,
Okay,
But you reached out to all board members, yes.
yes,
correct.
And then some number of management.
Yes, 5.
But
So far, only 1 have scheduled a meeting with Mary, and he's waiting for that.
and so 1 board member actually declined.
Okay. We'll follow up with that and get another update. Thanks. Any other meeting comments? That'll step back to number 1 and just do non-agenda item comments.
All right, we do have 1 non-agenda public comment. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead when you're ready.
All right, thank you. Blair Beekman, a real good luck to yourselves in how you will be able to address auditing issues coming up for the next 6 months or the next year and next years. I'm new to the process. I was at the February executive committee meetings and working on the future of auditing issues. I think a real small staff through June can do some really good work, and good luck in those efforts. And what I've been trying to say since February, and then I think others are trying to do too, it's been really nice, is that you're trying to keep the process open and accountable and understandable for ourselves, and for people to be able to ask questions during public meetings, possibly for auditing items to be on consent calendars in the coming months, just for little reminders that we can openly talk about the auditing issues. So little things like that can help a lot and make it a good process. we're going to be going through in the next few months. So that's my understandings. So thanks for your time.
Great.
We do have one more public commenter, Catherine Rhodes. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Lovely. Thank you so much. This is Catherine Rhodes. Very sad news. Yesterday, the city of San Diego County City Council, Land Use and Housing, they voted 3-1 to criminalize the poor and homeless. They're going to create a new law so they could put people in our county jails and waste taxpayer money. All homeless advocates agree on a ban of tents near schools. This new law to criminalize the homeless is led by our cruel, strong mayor, Todd Gloria, and council member Steve Whitburn, who are both running for office in 2024. I would like that all you elected leaders here at SANDAG actually get some type of advice to see what the actions of the city will do to you guys. You know, the 17 other cities in the county, people are going to actually move to your areas instead because of this new law and because of the more, you know, the San Diego police arresting everybody. So another thing, please, you know, Google the word San Diego coastal zone map. Ordinance in our coastal zone can only go into effect after the California Coastal Commission and State Lands Commissions, who are the ultimate decision makers, not the city of San Diego. In the city of San Diego, homelessness will now be emptied from Steve Whitburn's and Todd Gloria's downtown San Diego and Hillcrest neighborhoods into our coastal zones of District 1, 2, and 8 that include the Otay Mesa, Nestor, PB Ocean Beach, Barrio Logan, Point Loma, La Jolla, Torrey Pines, and Carmel Valley. And so, you know, this is happening. And the sad thing is that what they're doing is, you know, they close the Neil Good Day Center on weekends. There's no there's one bathroom, I guess, at St. Vincent de Paul, and it's not that nice, using for thousands of people. And then the county gave a notice to the city of San Diego to put in public toilets because another hepatitis A crisis is emergent. And instead, they refused to put in one porta potty. They haven't even put one little porta potty anywhere in San Diego where the homeless are so that they have a place to go. And then yesterday they had all these pictures of, you know, sanitation pictures, like there was a reason. So anyway, you know, this cruel homeless thing is happening. And if I would like you guys to contact Mayor Todd Gloria and Steve Whitburn and tell them to stop trying to move all their homeless problems onto everybody else, including all of you. Thank you so much.
And that concludes the public commenters.
Thank you, Francesca. With no more public comment, we'll move on to item 4, which is approval of the meeting minutes. Are there any public comments on the meeting minutes that you know, Francesca?
No, we do not have any.
Okay. Any board members have any comments on the meeting minutes? And then Francesca, I believe since board member Kruger is absent, the council member Musgrove will be voting today.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so please, I can have a motion to approve minutes. Moved by Monson, go to second. Second by Musgrove.
Thank you
Call for
very
the vote, Francesca.
We'll start with board member Chair Zito
Zito, yes.
and board member Musgrove.
Aye.
Public member Agnes Wong Nickerson. Yes. Public member Stuart Halpern
Yes.
and public member Bob Monson.
Yes.
Thank you, and that motion passes unanimously.
Great. And we're now going to skip ahead to item number 6, which is the annual comprehensive financial report that's been audited and other financial compliance audits. And, oh, Andre managed to make it too. Catherine and Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I can just introduce the item and I'll turn it over to Kathy. So, as you know, SANDAG is required to go through financial and compliance audits conducted by an independent certified public firm each year. Pro LLP was the CPA firm that conducted and concluded our fiscal year 22 audit early in the year, including the audit of SANDAG's annual consolidated financial report, which includes the basic financial statements plus the 3 component units, which includes the San Diego County Regional Transportation Commission, Source Point, Argus, along with the basic financial statements for SR 125. The annual audit report also includes the single audit and TDA audits. The purpose of the audit is to provide reasonable assurance that SANDAG's financial statements are prepared in accordance with GAAP and they are accurate and reliable. Also, it ensures that SANDAG complies with federal and state laws and regulations, and we follow the guidelines and provisions that pertain to our federal grants and programs. So Kathy Lay, the engagement partner with Crow LLP, is here to discuss the results of our audits today.
Thank you, Andre. Once again, I'm Kathy Lyon. For the record, I'm an audit partner with Crow and the lead engagement partner for SANDAG as a whole. Joining me remotely, I have Jennifer Richards, another partner specifically over the TDA fund audits, and so she'll be presenting part of our presentation today, as well as Rachel Snyder, our lead senior manager on the engagement. So before I begin, I just wanted to express my appreciation certainly to those team members and all those that stand behind them, and likewise management for their cooperation throughout the audit. If you can advance to the next slide. We've got a brief agenda here today. I just want, since it's been a while since we presented our planning communications, we wanted to go over the engagement objectives, and then likewise the different deliverables that we have today. We have 2 financial statement findings that I wanted to discuss with the committee, and then go through some standard required communications under our professional auditing standards, and certainly welcome questions throughout or at the end. Next slide. So first off, with respect to our engagement objectives, it's really important to articulate what management's responsibilities are versus the auditors. So Crow was engaged to express an opinion on the financial statements for a variety of entities that I'll cover, to determine whether or not those financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP for short. As auditors, we conduct our audits in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. And then also because you are a recipient of federal grants, we had almost 100 million and federal expenditures for the year. We also conduct our audits in accordance with government auditing standards on top of the generally accepted auditing standards. So those standards require that we obtain reasonable assurance that those financial statements are fairly stated, and certainly not absolute, but reasonable assurance that they're materially correct. So those are our responsibilities. It's important to note management's responsibilities as well. They are solely responsible for all those financial reports and financial statements, the disclosures, and then likewise all the internal controls over those financial reports today. So those are the engagement objectives and different roles and responsibilities. Let's go ahead and pivot to the results. So Andre had already articulated all the different audits that we perform. On this particular page, these happen to be the financial statement audits. And then in accordance with the commission, there's also a schedule of cash flows that your TIPULA required to be conducted as well. So I'm pleased to report for the independent auditors reports on all of these that we issued an unmodified opinion. So if my opinion states that the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and that statement is unmodified, it's actually very good news. It's the highest level of assurance you can receive. With the financial statement audit, we did have 2 material weaknesses in internal controls, and so I'll describe that after we go through all the different results for the different reports. Next slide. So on this slide, as I mentioned, for the single audit, you're a recipient of federal grants, and so we have conducted the single audit over specific federal programs that we've determined to be major programs under the OMB uniform guidance. In this case, it was the Federal Transit Cluster, and we've issued an unmodified opinion, didn't have any compliance findings to note to this group today. The last 2 items, the certification of the NTD or National Transit Database report, and also the Coronado Bridge Toll Road report is actually still in process. Just very briefly, the NTD report is in process simply because the FTA is very behind in processing one of the critical reports that is utilized as one of the procedures and the agreed upon procedures. So it's really through no fault of management, but as soon as the FTA catches up to that, we'll perform our procedure and then issue that report. And so nothing to report on that today. And then with respect to the Coronado Bridge toll revenues agreed upon procedures, there are some pending schedules from management from the city. And so we've worked with management here at SANDAG to obtain those. And so once we receive them, we'll complete our procedures related to those. So that concludes my section. I'm going to go ahead and pivot over to the next slide and invite Jennifer Richards, audit partner with Crow, to present the TDA results. Jennifer?
Sure, thanks, Kathy. So on the TDA fiscal and compliance audit, so there are 11 cities listed here, and then an agreed upon procedures for SANDAG itself and 3 reports for the County of San Diego that we've been engaged to issue. And at this point, we've issued all of them with the exception of 2 entities that are being wrapped up, and we expect to issue by April 30th. And a state controller's office has agreed on that extension. The city of El Cajon, in fact, we're wrapping up some testing on those 2 entities. Overall, all of the audit opinions that we've issued have been clean opinions, and we have no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls to report.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. I'll go ahead and pivot to those 2 financial statement findings that I wanted to discuss. The first one, we labeled it as the major fund determination. So by way of description, there is an accounting standard, it's GASB 34, that requires management to go through a mathematical calculation that's articulated in the standard. And the point of that standard is to ensure that funds that meet a certain threshold are separated and called major funds, and they have an individual column within the financial statements of the annual comprehensive financial report. And so we observed as we conducted our test work that management had calculated that initial determination of major funds, but after the audit and after all the post-closing journal entries, et cetera, they needed to perform another calculation because there was a major fund after all the adjustments that actually popped up and then was required to be presented separately in its own column. So had we not caught that, then we would have missed a major fund in our audit opinion. And then likewise, there wouldn't be that individual visibility within the annual comprehensive financial report, or in other words, a column specifically dedicated to that fund. The fund involved, I believe, is the General Services Fund. And typically that's a non-major fund, and I think has been for quite some time. So it was a little bit of a surprise. We have noticed with new accounting standards that are implemented from year to year, for example, GASB 87, which is our lease standard that was implemented in the year, sometimes that changes the numbers, right? It shifts that because of the new accounting standards. So our recommendation here, if we move to the next slide, is just to ensure that management is really doing a calculation of that major fund determination once their final trial balances are set, so that they don't miss an opinion unit or a major fund within their report. Are there any comments related to management's response?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Kathy. And just like we take OIPA's comments seriously, so do we of our independent auditors. And we've actually created a spreadsheet that now, as we go into the audits, we don't put in all the numbers, and then it kind of tells us which is a major fund versus not. I think, as Kathy said, our major funds have been pretty consistent over the years, and the General Services Fund kind of crept up to it. So we didn't pay as much attention as we should have. Again, there wasn't that there was any miscalculations there. Everything was correct. It was just labeled in the wrong area. So we have come up with the Excel spreadsheet that as we go into the audits, we'll make sure to line up everything to make sure if it's a major fund or a non-major fund. So I think we have something that this should not happen going forward.
Yeah, terrific. All right, so we'll move on to the second finding here. And that's in relation to ARGIS. As we were doing our expense test work, we had noted that there were some invoices that were incorrectly expensed and should have either been capitalized or they were prepaid expenses for future periods and not for the June 30th, 2022 fiscal year. So all in all, there was about 700 and I should have worn my glasses, 708,000 in expenses that really should have either been capitalized or recorded as prepaid expenses. And so because of the dollar amount was material relative to ARGIS, which is a smaller entity than, of course, the remainder of SANDAG's funds, we had to determine that it was a material weakness in internal controls. So on the next slide here, of course, we just recommended management to strengthen their internal controls relative to the expenses, making sure that they're reviewing them to determine if they're capitalizable. If they're capitalizable, they should be recorded as a capital asset. And then certainly to ensure that it's recorded to the proper period. So if it's a future period, but it's prepaid, then it should have been recorded as prepaid expense as opposed to a current year expense in the financial statements.
Yeah, again, this is something that to us as accountants is a fairly basic thing which should not be overlooked, but it was. And I think unfortunately the Great Resignation hit us just as did most entities. And so we actually lost our lead accountant on this. She actually retired, as well as a brand new person. So generally, an accountant will do the reconciliation, then it will go to a manager for review. Both of them are new and unfortunately was in court, but we do have procedures in there now, have an extra level of review when it comes to year end. So again, this is something that hopefully will not happen again.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and move on to our required communications, and certainly if there's questions, I'm happy to address those. So we've already gone through the plan scope and timing of the audit. That was our previous planning meeting with you. Relative to significant or unusual transactions, there were none noted today other than the 2 findings that we had. I will note again that management did implement a new standard that was required. It's GASB 87 related to leases. So all that does is really redefine the term lease and requires the right to use asset on the financial statements offset by a right to use liability, a lease liability. Significant accounting policies, might encourage you to look at the financial statements in footnote 1. Management has a summary of significant accounting policies, and we've reviewed them and have no comments relative to those. For accounting estimates, it's certainly normal as part of the financial statement process to have estimates included. A really easy example would be pensions and OPEB liabilities. Certainly we need to utilize, or management needs to utilize, actuaries to come up with those financial statement liabilities for pension and OPEB liabilities. So we've reviewed those and we don't have comments related to that. And then last but not least, we didn't have any material corrected or uncorrected misstatements to report to you today. On the next slide, I'll just finish it off here and won't necessarily go through all of these, but I'm happy to report that we didn't experience any of those issues with significant difficulties or disagreements or consultations with other accountants if they didn't like our respective guidance. And we're not aware of any other information and documents, being with our audited financial statements that hasn't been disclosed to us. And then just an affirmative response here that management has in fact provided us a representation letter in conjunction with the audit. And last but not least, and probably most importantly, that we are independent of SANDAG as the independent auditors. So with that, I'm happy to address any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. I guess we'll take some questions first if there are questions before we get to comments. Do any members have questions?
The specifics, thank you. The specifics of the misalignment, I suppose, of the expenditures for the IT. Does the report have the detailed items that were included in that? Or is it just a general number?
It's a summarized number, but certainly management could provide you all the detail related to that. And we have it in our audit papers as well. Okay, thank you. Sure.
Yeah, a couple questions. So the misclassification of expenses, it should have been asset or whatever. So did it impact anything in terms from getting reimbursement from the funding agency in this case, or is it really just a financial statement presentation issue?
Financial statement presentation. The entirety of that 708,000 was originally expensed on the income statement. And then a portion of that was incorrect. A portion of that should have been reclassed and should have been a capital asset because it met the definition of a capital asset. And then the other portion was pertaining to future periods. So it should have been prepaid expenses. So all that 708,000 was on the income statement. It should have been shifted to the balance sheet. So no issues to my knowledge relative to reimbursements for funding sources and et cetera.
Okay, so no issues about, them being disallowed because they don't pay the expenses.
Yeah, it's more so classification and on the financial statements.
Then the second question I have is, due to these errors that you found, you have to expand your scope to make sure there are no other material transactions that fell under the same kind of a situation?
Yeah, we do. I mean, as we run across errors, we do, stop and we talk to management, certainly. Sometimes when you do that, you realize, oh, that's just one of a larger population. And so we make management go back and kind of scrub through everything. In this case, this was the only one that came to our attention as we inquired further and looked into other transactions.
So that you didn't expand the scope and make sure that large transactions are properly classified.
Correct. Yeah.
Questions? Anything good? Take the question, sure.
Yeah. So actually I have two for Andre first, and then I've got.
Sure.
Just out of curiosity, you referenced the spreadsheet that has now been created.
I guess I have in my mind is, you know, a person sitting there with an Excel sheet on their screen, and I'm wondering, is there not the ability to do sort of like a subroutine that's a report generated out of the accounting system? So we're not relying on somebody, you know, sitting there doing, you know, individual calculations.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I think, you know, we've heard a lot about our new ERP system that's coming online. That's something that will probably be generated automatically for us. I think right now, the system that we have in one solution, we could probably write a query report to do that for us, but sometimes it's just easier to do it on an Excel. And again, this is just a fix for a year until the new ERP system comes on.
Okay, great. The second thing, and this is a little bit of a digression, but since you did mention, you talked about staffing. I'm wondering if perhaps as a future agenda item, you could just do a little bit of a review of the finance accounting department current staffing. I don't know if in the upcoming budget, you're going to be, you know, looking to add people if you need to add people. I guess my comment would be that would be a useful item for just for us as a committee to get an update, and also for you to express to what degree you feel like you need more assistance. Would be good to know.
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Great. And then, so then the question I have for you, Kathy, is, and this is frankly, I realize probably more of a planning kind of question, should have gotten this a while ago, but to what extent have you been following along with the work of the OIPA?
Yeah, so we had conversations and meetings with Mary, certainly at the onset of the audit. We certainly appreciate her input relative to her risk assessment and the ongoing projects. At the time in which we discussed with her, I know she had noted the procurement review ongoing. And, you know, we had issued our audit report, I think, before management is still, I think you've responded. And so we haven't seen the entirety of the report. It sounds like there's still a little bit of back and forth with management's response, and it's not fully concluded. But, you know, we consider her feedback, and likewise, when we have issues related to our audit, we share those with her team as well.
So it would be fair to say that your risk assessment of the control environment, in fact, is informed by those kinds of conversations.
It's definitely informed, and there are certain procedures, you know, related to the financial statement audit or even the single audit that we have pivoted on, you know, based on what we've learned, you know, relative to the ongoing audits and results. But I just would caution the group that the scope of our audit is a bit different. You know, we consider internal controls over financial reporting, but we don't express an opinion related to those. So I think Mary and her team kind of takes a deeper dive, you know, relative to the internal controls. Even the respective periods that they inspect are different at times, you know, related to ours. But regardless of those differences, we understand kind of the overarching concerns that have been presented. And then my team gets together through our risk assessment process, which is required under our standards, and try to pivot our audit plan where necessary.
Got it. Yeah, I was going to say, I know the scopes are very different.
They're different. They're different, but you know, they're in the same lane.
Yeah.
It diverges, and we're, you know, can be complementary to one another. Certainly we keep in mind too, the burden on management, right? And trying to understand kind of the things in which they've looked at versus us. But at the end of the day, we're beholden to our standards to get audit evidence relative to our opinions. So.
Yeah, and a little bit of a disadvantage. We haven't yet seen that report. I guess really I'm asking the question because frankly, based on some of what Mary and the team have described in prior meetings about what they're seeing, it just raised the question in my mind if some of what they're seeing actually would rise to a level of materiality that might show up within your scope. And we certainly don't want there to be, you know, this sort of just gap between scopes that lets something fall through the cracks from a financial reporting standpoint.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. You know, this is not this year, but you might recall from last year, for example, I think we had some P card purchase findings. So at times we intersect, and were those amounts, you know, per se material from a quantitative perspective? Maybe not, but we understood the heightened sensitivity related to the matter. And so we decided to report what we had noted, you know, in that particular year. So that's a good example of where they kind of intersect. But there is certainly possibilities for areas in which she's going to look at that may not, you know, we may not have encountered during our financial statement audit relative to our scope.
Great, thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Francesca, do we have public speakers?
Yes, Tim Eilish would like to speak on this item. And I don't see any hands on Zoom.
Thank you, committee, for taking my comments, and I appreciate the efforts of this committee in terms of helping the auditors. And thanks for this report. I'm not an engineer and I'm certainly not an accountant, so forgive my questions if they. And it seems to me that the independent internal auditors have done a pretty good job in terms of keeping track. The thing, your findings were in addition, in other words, you looked and you found this one instance. 700,000 things is a lot of things to me from the outside. I don't know how you found them, but do you have a dollar amount? And this is the time period for the previous year.
Dr. Violet, just make sure you're addressing the board, though, okay? Keep talking.
I'm sorry.
Just make sure you're addressing everybody, not the staff. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that's really it. I just do a time period for this and the dollar amount. And whether this was kind of a newish finding that looks pretty much like it's paperwork.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No.
That's it. Dr. if you care to address the question?
Yeah, I think it was one invoice that we're discussing. It wasn't 700,000 items, it's $700,000. Again, for Argus, that's a material item. For the whole scheme of things for SANDAG, it is not, but again, we've addressed it and our goal is that it doesn't happen again.
Great. Any other board member comments or questions on this particular topic? Okay, this is my recollection and information topic, so I presume will be now taking us next to the full board. And thanks for your input, thanks for your diligence, and thanks to staff for responding and making sure that our material items don't show, or not material items, but our misstatements don't happen again.
All right, thank you.
With that, we will go ahead and step back to report number 5, or number 5, which is relative to the independent performance audit recruitment. So I'll kick this off with just a few topics, and then I'll hand it over to the subcommittee. But I think as we're all aware, Mary, at the beginning of the year, announced her retirement as of June 30th, which kicked us into gear to start doing a lot of things. But since then, we've been fortunate to be given a bit more time. She has extended her retirement date to October 31st, I believe now. And so we are in the process of we're looking to recruit a new IPA to fill that role. We immediately set up a subcommittee, which consists of committee members, Monson and Halpern, and they've started doing some work with respect to that. And in the process of doing so, it was requested by the board chair that we consider adding another member as an advisory member. So Stuart and Bob are still the main members, but as an advisory member, in part to add some view from a diversity perspective. And she recommended Vice Mayor Luce Molina, who's in the audience over there. And I just want to express and she mentioned that to me, and it was brought to the subcommittee, and they agreed that it would be a good thing to have a third set of eyes more amenable to the addition. So I want to thank Luce, and actually, since we're on this topic, if you wanted to come up here in case instead of the table, in case any questions get asked that you would like to participate in as a member of the advisory subcommittee, I might get asked. I'll ask you to do so. But and so part one of the things from a historic perspective, we of course initially set up the subcommittee, then we made a recommendation that we keep the OIPA function as an in-house function, and that was taken to the board. Taken to the executive committee asked for further analysis, came back, and the executive committee then made a recommendation to the board that we keep it as an in-house function, or replace Mary with another full-time staff position, which then the board ultimately approved. One other thing that's notable is since this timeframe has been extended, all 3 of the public members' terms were set to expire in May. And so in order to keep the subcommittee active and available through the recruitment process, we made a recommendation, which the board voted on and approved today, to extend the subcommittee members, Monson and Halpern, for another 5 months. So they'll be with us for another 5 months beyond May. And then staff had mentioned to me that committee member, Lauren Nickerson, her term was up at the same time as well. And I chatted with her because in order to prevent from having to go through a public member recruitment process twice in 1 year, we thought it would be expedient, easy just to extend her term. So the motion that was done today was to extend all 3 public members for another 5 months, so that we can do the recruitment process in one motion at that point in time. And I appreciate your willingness to hang on for another 5 months. And the same with us. And I also would say the same of members over in a month. Thank you for agreeing to hang on to a thoroughly enjoyable, well-compensated job. Helps us through. With that, I think that kind of wraps up where we're at. The board did ask and decide, the recruitment firm to use. So we've gone through the motions of selecting a recruitment company. I'll let the subcommittee go through with where we're at with that at this point in time, and then we'll take it from there. So take it away.
There's Ito. First of all, before we get started, I want to thank Melissa and Janet for going through that RFO process and getting that all initiated, things of that nature. Just made things speed up a little bit. And then I want to also thank Luz for all the input that she's given me for our subcommittee. It's been very, very helpful. So without going into the background, which Josito has amply done that. HR sent out an RFO, put it together, sent out an RFO to firms, to anybody that wanted to send in a proposal. We had 4 proposals that were submitted. And then on April 12th, we had our first meeting of all 4 firms. As a result of that meeting, 3 firms were shortlisted. We had that meeting on 14th, this last Wednesday. I'm sorry, yeah, it's last Wednesday. At which time we ranked those 3 firms. And so if you go ahead and have that slide brought up. Yes. So obviously we're not naming the firms here. We had firm A that had the largest score, with firm B and C following behind. As a result of that, this subcommittee's recommendation is that the audit committee approve firm A, which is CBS HR Consulting, as the firm that will conduct the recruitment. In addition to that, we're asking the committee to authorize staff to enter into negotiations with the preferred firm, and then that resulting will then go to the board at their next meeting. And with that, we're here to ask any questions. I know I've really rushed through this. And Janet and Melissa and Bruce, of course, is here to answer any questions that people have.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to add one more thing.
Sure.
To something that we had discussed as we were walking into this meeting. As a part of that recommendation, one of the things that came up with all 4 firms was that there could be difficulty getting good candidates to come in here due to the fact that SANDAG offers only a 2-year contract for the IPA. And I know I, as a retired chief audit executive, would agree with that. Not just personally, my contract was 5 years from the very beginning when I first stepped into that. And based on people I've talked with in similar positions, it varies from 3 to 5. And so I think we're asking that it be presented to the board that perhaps they think about increasing that contract amount.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So with that, I mean, that is technically 5A, just so we can take all public comments at once. I've actually already gone over 5B, which is basically what happened. I wasn't sure. I asked for this to be put on the agenda just to make sure if the item got pulled today, that we had a chance to, opportunity to discuss on it, but it wasn't pulled, it was on consent and the public member terms were extended. So we have their presence, with us as well through this recruitment process. And then as Bob said, we expect any decision being made here to be brought to the board on their next full meeting in 2 weeks. So with that, Francesca, do we have any public member comments on either 5A or 5B? Well, perfect. Okay, so board member comments or thoughts, and my appreciation of the members. I mean, we have already talked, so.
I'll make one
Yeah,
comment.
sure.
As for me, as I was going through this process, all four firms had good experience. But there were a couple of the three that were up there really were the firms that had the most experience when it was related specifically to this kind of position. Mainly from the independence standpoint.
Right.
And I think that we'll find with the firm that is being recommended, they have quite a bit of experience. The other thing that I personally liked about the firm is you're going to find this subcommittee is going to want to work a lot more closely with the recruiters, the recruitment firm that comes in, and this particular one was, I felt pretty important to that.
Perfect.
So.
Good feedback. Any other comments about it?
Yeah, man, just. So a couple of things. Also, just want to echo my thanks to Melissa and Jan, who really helped on the process as well. It's a pleasure to have you participate and really appreciate you. Also, just really want to express, thanks to the board for entrusting us with this and extending the terms. We're both happy to do it. Glad to have the opportunity to sort of finish this through with our terms. Just to echo a little bit of what Bob had to say. You all may recall some time ago, I guess it was January or January, we'd actually said this is a very, very specialized position. It's unlikely you're going to find any firms that can claim a big track record of hiring independent auditors. I mean, they just don't exist. And unless Bob puts up a shingle after his term, this is just not the type of thing that you can find. So
Did I put in a gorilla application?
But as the board requested, trying to find a search firm, we very much look through that lens. Who has an understanding of the role, and that was very much front and center. And so we think that the firm that we're recommending is very good sort of trade between a full service firm, but frankly at a price that reflects the fact that, as Bob said, we expect as a committee to be very engaged in the process just because of the highly specialized nature of this position. So look forward to
Great.
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. The question is this the type of firm that will do more than just screening incoming application? Would they go out and actively recruiting potential candidates?
Well, and we all may have different points of view on this. I think because of the specialized nature, and Bob alluded to this, and I think we use similar lines here. We expect that we'll probably be a little bit more engaged in that kind of initial screening, or at least setting the parameters to help the search firm really understand what those parameters, those initial search firms be. They have done a couple of independent auditor searches. But again, it's not like anybody can say, yeah, I have personal relationships with 30 plus independent auditors around, the region. So they will, they're fully equipped to do a conventional full sort of blanket universe type recruitment. But, the question is, and they mentioned a database of 10,000 auditors. We're not looking for auditors, we're looking for kind of specialty subset. So it's, the broad recruitment. It's a question as to what the return on investment is, as opposed to, just narrowing it down to a more specialized kind of way. But they can do, yes, they can do recruitment, selection, that's what I said, full service.
Because there may be people out there who are really good, they're not really looking for a new
Yes,
job,
exactly.
but.
I think to hone in on your question was like, when I've gone through other recruitments, knowing full aware of what you just said is the key issue here, which is you're dealing with a fairly lightly populated area here, but a lot of recruiting firms would say, yeah, I actually know a couple places where there's some people I should go poke on this because I think they would be a really good person for this. But did any of these firms actually say anything like that, or they just say, we're just going to make it as broadly and widely known as possible and try to get you the best fit?
Well, what I liked about this particular firm is they did hone in on. I thought their strategy, first of all, for recruiting was really good. They combined honing in on a variety of different professional organizations, contacts with those in particular. They also had their own headhunting or recruiting type strategy that they were going to include overall. That's what I liked about them. So Luce, I don't know if you have any comments.
Yes, we asked very, I guess I would call them very specialized questions during the interview, and they were asked of all of the applicants. And one of the questions had to do with what the market is like for this type of position and what challenges may come about, gathering the right type of person. And specifically, we did ask, can our experts that are already involved in the process, can they have an input? And the firm that was chosen was very open to receiving input. And they, if I recall correctly, there was a specific mention that, yeah, we will rely on your expertise. You can, we would appreciate that input because it would help us come back with a robust set of candidates that are going to be able to meet the very specific scope of work that is to be done under this this role. And so I felt very comfortable with the response from the individual that was representing this firm in their willingness to work with a subcommittee, for example, and also with their ability to reach out to the appropriate networks, whether it is their own network or their own databases, as well as from the experts that we have in-house already.
Great.
So it sounds like it'd be a combination that they will be going out actively recruiting.
I think they will, but getting back to Stuart's point, there's the willingness to work with the subcommittee. I just have this feeling the subcommittee is going to be doing a lot more, as I really think they should with this kind of position. The subcommittee is going to do a lot more work from the very beginning. All of this really helps. So.
Which is good, as you said, the way it should be. Perfect. Sounds like it's not a good fit.
I'd be pleasantly surprised if a search firm actually identified a candidate based on a personal relationship, just because this is so narrow. Whereas like in your field, there are big recruiting firms who have national practices for educational institution leadership positions, right?
So sometimes they don't necessarily have a personal relationship, but they know these positions in different agencies that are similar.
Yeah.
And they will go on and do a bit more research. Is that a good person, and try to approach the person and say, we have this great opportunity. Are you interested in talking? And that's part of, I hope that would be doing this.
But yeah, and I think that would be a discussion, I guess, for this committee as to, and also the board as to whether people who aren't already independent performance auditors are potential people to be considering, because again, the specialized nature. So yeah.
And the second thing that Bob brought up about a 2-year contract, is this okay for us to talk about it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because this is a pretty senior position for someone to leave another senior position to come with 2-year contract only. I don't think that's very attractive at all. I mean, I've seen different areas that, they might offer a 5-year contract or subject to performance, if their performance issue, you can terminate early, and I would strongly recommend, something along that line.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, that's what it is for us. I don't recall exactly what the number is, but I seem to recall the IPA position requires for cause, which is a 2/3 vote of the audit committee and a 2/3 vote of the board. Is the only a reason that the IPA can be let go. It's my recollection. Either 2/3 or 3/4, but it's the super majority one way or another.
So how do we make that recommendation, changing it from 2 years to 5 years?
Well, yeah, I think that I guess the question is, yes, please.
I have a question on that, and I don't know well enough to know whether is it stipulated for 2 years as written in AB 805, and if that's the case.
No,
board policy.
Oh, it's a board policy. Okay,
Board policy
okay.
39.
I wasn't sure where that was stipulated.
So yeah, I think that, is there any other questions or comments at this point? I think that, with that, it's probably the easiest way to do it would be just this is an action item, and that I'd be entertaining a motion to accept the audit subcommittee's recommendation to nominate, was that May? Sorry, that was up there before, as the recruitment firm, and also recommend to the board that they consider extending the term based of extending the contract term of the position based upon the feedback received from the recruiting firms.
We'll make a motion.
Okay, thanks. Second, Board Member Monson, any other discussion? Stuart?
Yeah, well, I would just say, based on prior experience, it sounds like if we're going to make a recommendation of extending terms, we probably need to do a little bit of background research to inform the board as to other precedents.
Yeah, no, I think that as we come to getting this action will go to a staff report for the board to be considering, and I will just make sure that I get something put to that staff report so we understand why, and consider it as part of that. They can choose to do more research as well, or they could choose to act on it at that point in time. But I mean, there's a time urgency to this, so we'll have to see.
Do we have enough information about local agencies and usually the contract terms, so there's some example?
Well, that's what, yeah.
I know Stuart, the city auditor of San Diego is, what, 5 years?
The city of San Diego is 2 5-year terms with a hard stop at 10. Bob's expressed the port's been.
Port is 5. I'm not sure what the new port auditor's contract is. It's easy enough to.
Yeah, we should look up a couple of them for comparison.
Now, what's the airport?
I think it's 5.
5 years. I think you're gonna find, I think at the county, it's also 5. Those are things that can be easy
Yeah,
to find out.
okay. A motion and a second, call for the vote, Francesca.
Board Member Chair Zito,
Peter, yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Public Member Agnes Wong Nickerson,
Yes.
Public Member Stuart Halpern,
Yes.
and Public Member Bob Monson,
Yes.
and that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. So next we have item number 7, which is the annual performance review and salary adjustment for the independent performance auditor. We are admittedly a little bit late to this, but I think I have an excuse. Stuart and I did a lot of good work coming up with the process last year, but which we have chosen to ignore. But that was because at the time we chose to ignore it, one, Mary Kay was on vacation, and so we can just blame her. But then 2, she was still planning on retiring on June 30th and didn't think it was really applicable. But now that she has her term retirement moved to October 31st. I did discuss it with her, and she did ask that we go through this process. So I think it's it means we should do it normally at the first meeting. The intent is just to review the process and see if we want to change anything. But since we're delayed, I mean, the way normally we had outlined it was to review the process in the first meeting, and then the second meeting, the IPA would report on the performance results and outcomes for the year against the audit plan, and then we would set up a subcommittee to work getting some feedback and doing some research and making some recommendations on the performance results as well as potential adjustment in compensation. My suggestion is we still need to have that step. So my suggestion would be that, we sort of combine the two steps of if we can get some interest now of forming a subcommittee that may go and start looking at some of these things, and then at the May meeting, we could have the IPA do the update of the report on the performance results, and then if we're ready to go further, we can go further then, but then otherwise in June, come back and potentially make a recommendation to the board at that point in time. That is kind of how I see it working out. I know that interest and feedback on that overall thought process. Sound good to everybody? Yeah, okay. You may not agree in a second, but we'll see. Yeah. Well, we'll see, but I know that right now, Mr. Halpern's on two subcommittees. He's on one for the IPA recruitment. He's on the second one with me with respect to the next agenda topic that we have going on. And then
You see where this is.
yeah. And Bob and I are on a subcommittee as well, separate ones. And so I was hopeful maybe committee member Musgrove would be willing to sign up to do this test this year. And one of the things that came up in our policy recommendation was to have a board member and a public member on the subcommittee, and that leaves you as a remaining public member. Are you willing to consider doing it this time? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
And we need Bob to help me a little bit. I think last year I worked with the other one.
But okay, so that works out well. So with that, if I guess I'll go to, are there any public comments on this particular item, Francesca? Public comments? Okay, any other board member comments? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to set up that subcommittee.
Just a real quick, just to make sure I'm clear as to what exactly Agnes and Ed are going to. We're really doing the same thing we did the last time.
Basically,
Doing a
yes.
performance review
Yes.
of Mary
Yeah.
in that particular period.
Right, yes. And the period, just so everyone's clear, is her performance year, which is April 5th to April 5th, right? So it's April 5th, 22 to April 5th, 23. And then last year when we kicked this off, you already had the advantage of Mary going through and having produced, we have performance objectives, right? And it's up to her to come up with the first draft of that. So I imagine at least over the next month, she'll come up with that draft and run it by the subcommittee, and you can talk through any things to start coming back with a recommendation. That makes sense. Okay. Entertain a motion to set up the subcommittee. So moved by board member committee Halpern, second by Monson, to have a subcommittee of committee member Musgrove and Nickerson to start the performance review. I call for the vote, please.
Board member Terzito,
Yes.
board member Musgrove.
Aye.
Public member Agnes Wong Nickerson,
Yes.
public member Stuart Halpern,
Yes.
and public member Bob Monson,
Yes.
and that motion passes unanimously.
Perfect, thanks. So that then takes us on to agenda item 8, which is selection and recommendation for the procurement of the independent financial statement and audit firm. I guess I'm doing this one too. Talking too much today. What Stuart you'd like to lead off? No. So a little beknownst to me, even though I signed up for it last July, I think it was, we set up a subcommittee consisting of a committee member Helper and myself to go through. The audit committee is responsible for selecting or making a recommendation to the board of selecting the firm that does the financial audits, which is actually what we heard today earlier, is the result of that, which was, from the firm Crow. They did it for the past year, and their contract was up, and so it was time to do another one. The last year, there was a subcommittee set up to do the RFP and provide input on RFP, which Stuart and I did. I didn't realize that I also signed up for this, that subcommittee continue through the selection process. But so we've met again because RFP was put out, and there were technically 3 firms that responded to the RFP. Our committee member Halpern with his eagle eye pointed out that realistically, this committee was only supposed to be dealing with half of the RFP. which was the SANDAG financial audits, and the ITALC committee was supposed to be the name of the other half of the RFP, because the RFP constituted both the ITALC audit as well as the SANDAG audit. So we did all of this great work, and now then we split it. So technically, for the SANDAG financial statement, there were only 2 respondents. There were not 3. And we went through and scored them, and Stuart and I also brought in, like what we did with Luce for that committee, we brought in Mary as an advisory member to our committee as well. Mary Kay provided inputs as well, and we went through and made had a meeting reviewing the inputs, and ended up for our subboard just shortlisting 1 firm. Which was, go back and look.
Are we saying the name?
I don't know. Can we say the name yet? That's okay.
Recommendation.
Yeah,
Recommend a firm.
yeah,
Davis Farr.
it was David Farr, yeah, so it's going back to like, they were recommending David Farr being the only one shortlisted. And, but we felt like, since David Farr, for your information, has been doing the ITALC audits over the past several years, so they are familiar with SANDAG. But since they hadn't been doing the financial audits, we also felt pretty important to go to an interview phase. And so, you know, this is mostly an update on what people disagree with us. Our plan is to have the interview portion next week, and or soon thereafter, and just interview them. And assuming everything goes well, an actual recommendation would come out of this committee in the May meeting, and based upon the subcommittee input. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm curious, you know, people, first I'll see if there's any public member input for this particular item.
No public comments.
No public comments. Yeah, that's great. And so Stuart and I are both here available to answer questions if you have any questions. We're at board member, or any council member.
With respect to the ITALC, have they expressed an opinion on their portion, or is it solely relying on what we said?
So that we've actually bifurcated this. There's two separate actions going on right now, which is one, and they are separately listed in the actual RFP. There is selection of a financial firm for SANDAG audits and a selection of a financial firm for ITALC audits. And actually, that's why we ended up 3 firms bid, but 1 firm only bid on the SANDAG audits, 1 firm only bid on the ITALC audits, and then 1 firm bid on both. And so there's actually only 2 firms that bid on each half. And so at this point, we've bifurcated it. The ITALC subcommittees will take up the ITALC recommendation entirely separate from this. And we're only making a recommendation for the SANDAG financial audit.
So it's possible it could be the same firm or not.
It could be of the same firm, yes.
Yeah, as the chair mentioned, Davis Farr has done the ITALC oversees the Transnet compliance audit. It's not a financial audit, it's the compliance audit.
Yeah.
And so they've done that for some number of years. And so they get on both. There's another firm that only bid on the Transnet compliance audit. And again, this is something that the ordinance specifies as a top responsibility. And so the ITALC will do that part of the selection. Just for expedience, the RFP would have all at once, but really should be the ITALC mix, the Transnet compliance audit selection. If that clears it up, or maybe it confuses it.
No, it does. It's just, there's gonna be, if by chance they take Davis Farr, there's gonna be an increased volume of work on essentially the same timeline.
Yes, which
Will be
likely something that we'll cover
That'll be
that's
the
right,
question.
in our interview before we were willing to go with them, knowing that they very clearly understand the scope of the ITALC work, should they get us accepted to that again.
I like knowing what's on the other side of the cliff, but I don't need to go to the very edge to see it. Amberlynn, any issues with conflicts? I know that there shouldn't be, but
No,
if they were to do both,
no, there would be no conflict. As Mr. Hopper was mentioning, each committee kind of has its own, the audits cover 2 separate topics, and each committee kind of has its own oversight of those topics.
no crossover between the 2.
There's no crossover.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question. I'm not familiar with the firm, but I guess some of you are because of the ITALC audit. Just curious, I'm surprised to hear so few firms put in a proposal for financial audit. Is it because of the that was an issue, or do you have a theory why there's not?
Yeah, we ask those questions too, and we think in future periods, we may want to be a little bit more aggressive about recruiting. Staff mentioned, and I don't know if anyone from staff here has a.
Well, I'm-
And I think they said that there are something like 20 some, 20 or 27 firms listed and that would get our actual RFP. And then of those 9, I believe, pulled down the RFP, but then only these 3 responded. So I do think another, I do think that it would behoove us to, if we haven't already, follow up with the other 6 firms and find out why they didn't respond. I don't know if we've done that yet.
I don't believe we've done that at this point yet, but I think, yeah, it is unfortunate that we only had this number respond. I think 5 years ago when we did this, we had twice as many respond. I did reach out at that point to some of the big 4 firms. I used to work at KPMG. I guess they generally have got out of the government work in the sense that they just don't have enough staffing to do it. And so they go after the bigger dollars. Maybe government doesn't pay as much as the private sector does. And so I think that's why it's just like anything else we're seeing, trying to get good quality staff sometimes is a big limitation. And so their resources are going after the bigger dollars, unfortunately, but maybe we can be a little bit more proactive in the next 5 years and maybe reach out and speak to the firms.
Well, yeah, I would like to this time do though, but
Yes.
of the 6 that didn't, particularly the 6 that pulled it that didn't respond, I think it would be useful for us to understand why they didn't respond.
We can do that.
If they were at least willing to look at a government agency, right? Sure. They pulled it down.
And I think there are enough regional mid-sized firms that I would be surprised with so few responses. And another question, so this contract is it for how many years if we select this one?
Generally, it's a 3-year term, 3-year options.
Right, 3 plus 1 plus 1. Yeah, it's 3 plus 1 plus 1, right? Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody need to tell us to do something different or give a vote in? Okay, great.
And one more question. I assume like after the if we have issues with the surface, level of surface, we have clauses that we can, make adjustments, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this would be even after our recommendation is, our recommendation is to simply start to go up with negotiations with their firm. So they still have to get through the negotiation phase, and I'm sure staff will do their due diligence of protecting us and those negotiations. Thank you. So with that, we can go back and see if Ray has an agency report that he'd like to give to us.
Well, thank you. Yesterday, the San Diego region received a visit from the Federal Railroad Administration, and Congressman Mike Levin hosted the administration of the Federal Railroad Administration, who rode on the coaster to view and discuss the low sand corridor. It's a very important corridor for us. Hassan joined Mayor of Solana Beach and Sandag's second Vice Chair Lisa Hebner, along with the congressman at the press conference in Solana Beach at the event. The daily passenger rail service is going to be restored between Orange County on Monday. It took 6.5 months to restore the service, and I think that really underscores the urgent need for Sandag to move forward with low sand relocation because of the fragile Delmar bluffs, and simultaneously, connecting our state, connecting to our state of good repair with the San Diego project. We interviewed consultants this week to select the team that will provide the environmental clearance and the advanced conceptual engineering work for the realignment project this week. And then next week, Sandag staff and board members will be traveling to Washington, D.C. as part of the chamber trip. And while they are there, they will be meeting with the Customs and Border Protection and General Services Administration to continue discussions related to the Otay Mesa East port event. So we're almost over the finish line with Otay Mesa East. We just need to get agreements from these 2 government agencies. I'm sure that concludes my report.
A quick one. Yeah, perfect. Okay, with that, our last topic item is the member non-agenda item
comments if there are any other questions.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I forgot. Are there public comments first?
No, they're not public.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Go ahead, Stuart.
I guess, in all honesty, this is a little bit more of a comment than a question, but I listened to your presentation this morning on the ERP system, and ERP system presentations typically aren't really super sexy, but
Either was fine.
no, but I think that it was a great presentation. I really think it underscored the tremendous work that's been done, as you outlined, and remediating just a wide range of issues. I think the other thing that is really important, and I hope that, it was clear to the board as well. You highlighted a number of the reports that came out of OIBA and how many areas of improvement that the staff has embraced and has accomplished to date. And, I think we all have a certain sense of, I think, a little trepidation as to this next audit report that's going to come out. Simon said it really well, is that hopefully everybody's going to focus on the substance and not the headlines. But I really think that your report today demonstrated how important the work has been of OIBA working in conjunction with the staff and improving the agency. And so I think it was a really very impactful presentation this morning. I hope everybody really appreciated for what it showed.
Thank you very much for my comment on that.
Sure.
We have a very complicated system here in terms of processes and procedures. A lot of them are 20 years old, and we have homegrown software systems that we built ourselves. And so they're not standard in the industry anywhere. We have other places where we move forward, places like SharePoint. Each one has its own set of processes. And so you can imagine how complex and complicated they are. And so when OIBA does do a report, the first thing we do is to see what we need to do to fix our current processes. But we're also taking that information and embedding it in the requirements for our new ERP system. So it's kind of being done in two different places. So there's kind of a fix for now until that gets implemented, and the rollout for that is between 2023 and 2024. It's coming out in three separate phases. And what we're doing is we are adjusting our processes to make sure that the suggestions are taken into account. The other thing we've asked OIBA to do is to be part of our user acceptance testing, so that they give us test scripts so that we can go in and make sure that we can answer the type of questions that they might have during the time period when they're having an audit. So there are certain things. I'll just give you one example so you can understand what I'm talking about. Like, for instance, OIBA was looking for every contract where a certain contractor was listed as either a contractor or a subcontractor in any contract. But we can't do that query. There's just no way, especially we have paper copies, we have things in SharePoint, we have CMS, which is yet another system. And so it's very complicated to pull all the subcontractors. That type of query is now being added into the requirements for the new system. And what we'll be doing is we'll be asking OIBA to give us test scripts that they want us to run. And then we will make sure that we can get the type of information they need for future audits. Now, I can't guarantee 100% of them can be done in this type of system, depending on the question. But my goal is to get us to a point where they can simply press a button and 95% of what they're looking for, if it's in an electronic system, it's just going to be coming down as reports. And then they can do their due diligence and go over that information. So it very much does help us. Thank you.
So, Ray, will that have an audit trail also for the new ERP?
Yes, I believe the ERP has the audit trail in it, but in addition to that, yes, we're working with, I've talked with Mary about this, so we're going to be working with you to do the test frames.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, then okay.
Just a quick question, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Not really a question, just a comment. And I didn't see your presentation, but have you been involved with in the past support, which is nowhere compared to SANDAG? I'm very impressed. You can do it. That's always, I know at the port, that was always the goal there. My auditors go in and punch a button and they get a list of a report. And, but it's much easier to think that as opposed to putting it in place. So I commend you and your staff and Mary and her staff in working hard to get that done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. With that, item number 9 is just member comments for non-agenda topics. Anybody have non-agenda topics they want to go over? Okay. So with that, the next audit committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, May 12th, 2023 at 12:30 p.m. And we are adjourned. Everybody have a great weekend. My third meeting.